The bright light at linebacker was number 52, middleman Dick Ambrose, named the team's Defensive Player of the Year. Ambrose led the Browns in tackles.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Club 46, driven by Bridgestone. I'm Jay Crawford, and I am thrilled to be joined today by all-time great former Cleveland Brown. They called him Bam Bam, Dick Ambrose. Dick, so good to see you. Thanks for taking some time for us. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Jay. I appreciate it.
In these interviews, Dick, we like to find out a little bit about everything, all aspects of your life, going back to your early years into college, and then, of course, your playing days with the NFL and your post-playing days. But before we go back to the beginning, I always like to start by asking you for one of your favorite memories during your time with the Cleveland Browns. When you think back on that time, what's the most vivid and favorite memory that you have?
Well, that's always a tough question. Over the years now, I've probably changed my answer several times. I like to look at it more in a collective sense now, just because of the number of years that passed. No one play stands out among many of the others. So I always now, in my elder years, look back to the 1980 season of the Kardiac Kids, the ones that most people remember when they talk about the Browns teams of that era. And that was just a very unique and special season for all of us on the team. It was very one of those things that where you come together as a team, and we played together. We lost together. We lost the Red Right 88 game. We lost it together, but the whole season in and of itself just gave me the appreciation of being on a team that all came together and at the right time, because I think we did probably achieve maybe more than we should have at the time. But it was a great year and a great memory for me.
All right, Dick, now let's go back to the early years, growing up in New Rochelle, New York. What was life like for a young Dick Ambrose there?
Well, I thought it was pretty good. I was the youngest of six kids, 3 girls, 3 boys. And I had my 2 older brothers were the next oldest to me. In other words, the 3 girls came first, then 3 boys. So my parents are very organized in that regard. And my 2 older brothers played football, which was what influenced me to know and love football. So I played at an early age in the New Rochelle Youth Tackle League at the time. And then I played also at my grade school, Holy Family Grammar School in New Rochelle. And from there, I went on to all boys Catholic high school, similar like a St. Ed's or Ignatius here. It was Iona Prep was the name of my high school. And of course, playing football was my number one activity there, other than trying to be a good student, which
Right.
I thought I was. And that's where I really developed, a love, and I learned the game, especially, in high school, and learned a love of the game, because we really had a pretty good program and at the time. So from there, the next step obviously was college. I was looking at a lot of different schools, but I was not, your blue chip prospect out of high school. I was still about 6 feet and about 200 pounds. So I wasn't really the kind of guy that would go to Ohio State or someplace like that. And basically, I was told that early on. So I was confining my college search to Ivy League schools. And then I also had a contact through my dad down at the University of Virginia. I went there for a visit. I liked them, they liked me. They did offer me a scholarship. So that's where I spent the next 4 years of my football career and academic career. And it was a good decision. I'm glad I went there. It was obviously a very high rated academic school. I met a lot of good people there. played football, did fairly well, although the team itself was not outstanding. Most we ever won in one season was 4 games. We played in the Atlantic Coast Conference, which was competitive at the time, but certainly wasn't the Big Ten or anything like that. I think the conference is much more competitive nationally now than it was back then. But in any event, I played well enough to earn some honors in college that got some attention with the pro scouts, and I thought I would be a good candidate for the NFL draft. NFL, and I, of course, a lot of people blow smoke at you at those times, especially those that are trying to represent you. And I had an impression that I would go in the top 5 rounds. That never happened. I went in the 12th round of 1975 draft. Now, at least there were 17 rounds back then. They've since reduced the number of rounds. But so I wasn't in the last round, but I wasn't really in the top round either. So I came into Cleveland with very little expectations for me. Of course, I had high expectations for myself. Playing in the NFL was in grade school, and I never really knew if the dream would work out or not, but I certainly never gave up the hope. And now I'm here at a camp in Cleveland, and we were at Kent State at that time in 1975. And it was a fortunate situation for me because the Browns weren't that good in 1975. And Forrest Gregg was just named head coach. He had taken over for Nick Skorich, who had been fired the year before. And Forrest was a guy that was not giving any veteran, that is, a free pass. In other words, everybody really had to earn a spot on the team. So he ran a very tough training camp. At least that's what the veterans tell me, because I thought it was okay as far as the degree of difficulty, but he ran a Green Bay Packers type training camp. And we really had it was a long period of time, because if you think back then, we played 6 preseason games.
Wow.
Before preseason started, you had 2 weeks of 2-a-day practices with the full team. But before the veterans came in, you had the rookies come in for a full week of practice before any veterans ever showed up. So you had almost a 10-week period of time before you played your first game. Now that's practically an entire college football season before you even start your NFL career. So I was most of the time very kind of worn out, even for a 22-year-old at the time.
For the Cleveland Browns, the 1975 season began with bright hopes and many new faces. 11 rookies made the team, and more than half became starters under the regime of Forrest Gregg. The Enchanted Forest was well aware the many rookies, combined with the new staff and brutal schedule, did not bode well for the season to come.
And all of us that made the team that year said, if we can make it through this year, that's it. We're quitting after this. This is too tough. Needless to say, none of us ever took each other up on that offer. We all played the whole season. It was a kind of a disastrous season. We went 3-11 that year, and the next season, obviously, we improved. But after 3 years of Forrest Gregg, that was the end of his regime. There was a regime change, and Sam Ratigliano was brought in. And I do have to credit Sam for injecting a new kind of attitude in the team. And that was in 1979 was his, or 78 was his first year, excuse me. And I was really impressed that he called each and every player, when he first got the job in Cleveland, and, told them what his expectations were of us and the team and how he's going to work to make this a better team. So I really think that was, getting off on the right foot. And he had a different approach than Forrest did, improved enough to get to the point where we were a playoff team in 1980. And that was the most memorable season. We went 11-5 that year, and made the playoffs. And we had a first round bye because we had won the Central Division Championship after beating the Houston Oilers in a very critical game down in the Astrodome at the time. They're now the Tennessee Titans. So a lot of these teams don't even exist anymore. But again, that set up the stage for the game against the Oakland Raiders at the time, who then went to LA and then back to Oakland. So that's how fortunes have changed in the NFL. But that was the notorious Red Right 88 game here in Cleveland in January of 1981, when it was 10 degrees out, but the wind chill was down below zero and the field was frozen. It was a typical tundra type game. And I thought it was hard fought, but, we came up short. Our offense, which has been explosive all season long, just kind of puttered a little bit in the cold weather and the bad field. And, they did mount a typical Kardiac Kid drive, the very last drive of the game, but that was the one where Brian Sipe threw an interception, and that basically ended the game and ended our playoff hopes that year, and any hope that I ever had of going to the Super Bowl.
Dick, that game was, as you said, hard fought. The field conditions weren't great. Don Cockcroft had missed a couple of kicks early in the game. As a bystander at that point, because that's essentially what you are, you're standing on the sidelines watching like the rest of us. You know that you're inside the 15-yard line. It would be a difficult kick under any circumstances in a playoff game, but particularly given the field conditions and Don's struggles earlier in the game. What were you thinking when you saw that the offense was going to stay on the field and they weren't going to go for what would have been a game-winning field goal?
Well, at that point, I had confidence that, our offense, which had now marched down the field, I believe it was almost 80 yards that they had marched to get down there, was going to do what they always do, and that's score a touchdown. The only thing that caused a little doubt in my mind was when Brian dropped back the pass, and Lyle Alzado, who was there with me on the sideline, said, "I can't believe they're bleeping passing the ball." And just then, Brian threw the ball, and the crowd just went totally silent. It was, you could hear a pin drop in a stadium with 80,000 people. And Mike Davis from the Raiders picked off the ball and fell to the ground. And the interesting sidelight on that is years later, Greg Pruitt, left us and got picked up by the Raiders. Like the next year, 2 years later, he told us that in practice, he watched Mike Davis. Mike Davis had the worst hands of any of the defensive backs on the Oakland Raiders. He said he would drop everything, but that day in those conditions, that ball just stuck right in his hand, and that was the end of our dream. And I guess maybe that was meant to happen. If here a guy that can't catch a cold catches that ball in those conditions, maybe that was meant to be. I guess it is meant to be, and we just have to live with it.
Dick, was there a sense of cruel irony that team, which made its reputation on late scores to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, had its incredible run end on a play that went the other way?
Yeah, I think it was, the irony is appropriately pointed out in the NFL Films version of that, with legendary John Facenda doing the narrating. Said he said, for the 1980 season,
the Browns lived by the forward pass. In the playoffs, they died by it.
And that was very appropriate for the moment.
Yeah, it certainly was. I've asked this question of many players that have lost just gut-wrenching games, because really, even though there were some great teams in the late 80s and early 90s that lost in the AFC Championship game, it wasn't until we saw what happened to Denver in the Super Bowls those years where we realized we probably weren't as close to winning the Super Bowl as we had thought at the time. So really going back to 1964 in the championship, it was that 1980 team that in all likelihood was the best position team to bring a Super Bowl to Cleveland. And so when I asked the question of athletes that have lost games such as that, when did you get over it? I've often been told, I'll let you know when it happens.
Right.
When did you put that loss in your rearview mirror? How long did that take?
Well, I knew it took at least a month to even accept the fact that we had lost. And it first came to light, the following Monday when, your body's just used to getting up and going into practice of the week, the day after the game. And, that just didn't exist anymore. We didn't have to go anywhere because the season's over. And so that took a while, but it was at least a month before it really set in that, and you start watching other teams playing in the games that you think you should have been in, that it starts sinking in and you just somehow have to accept it. But I think you're right. To truly accept the loss, you probably have to be out as far as I am now, which is years and years and years later, to be able to look at it in a perspective and not feel some kind of sense of emptiness or loss in your heart, because it does hurt.
Dick, how would you characterize your emotions then watching the Raiders handle the Chargers in the AFC Championship game and then pretty much have an easy time of it all the way through the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl trophy that really, if not for one play, should have been yours?
Yeah, I mean, there was very little sense of vindication when the Raiders went all the way. I suppose we could feel a little bit better than had they, gone to San Diego and gotten trounced by the Chargers that year. So that was some modicum of satisfaction, but didn't really do anything to quench the fire of despair that was flaming in all of us.
Yeah. Let's go back to your draft day experience. As you mentioned today, 7 rounds and done, you would have been relegated to the hopes of making the team as an undrafted free agent. What do you remember, Dick, about your draft day experience? How did you find out that you were drafted? Take us through all that.
Yeah, well, it's one of those days, and I'm at college. I'm not going to classes that day because I'm waiting for a phone call, and that's how it happened. You get a phone call. They didn't have the televised draft like they do now. They didn't make it a all-day event or anything like that. But I knew that at some point in time during the day, I should get a phone call. I waited the entire first day of the draft, and there was no phone call. And the draft, because of 17 rounds, it lasted 2 days. So we got into the second day of the draft, and then I got a phone call. I forget what time of the day it was. I think it was around midday, and it was from Mike Nixon, who was a scout with the Browns at the time. So it wasn't a coach, wasn't front office person. I guess you could say he was a front office person, but he said, "You've been drafted by the Browns." And although I was happy to be drafted, it was still kind of a disappointment that it had gone that long. So I was kind of in the mood of saying, "Yeah, thanks." And he said, somebody be getting in touch with you later with plans to come to Cleveland and everything like that. So I was disappointed, but happy that I got the opportunity, but more disappointed than happy. And so then obviously the rookies had to come into Cleveland for a rookie camp. And that was a couple of weeks later, my first trip to Cleveland ever. And they were set up at Baldwin Wallace College back in those days. That's where the practice facility was. So I had to learn the name Berea, Ohio, and find out where the practice facility was. I was there, and that's the first opportunity. And you walk into the locker room, which was the practice locker room for my entire career. And there you see your name on a locker, and there's a jersey hanging in the locker, and that's where I saw the number 52. And that's the first time I ever saw that. That's the first time I ever knew that was the number that I was going to get. So there wasn't anything like, hey, I want number 34, or I want this. You just get it, and that's it, and shut up, because that's your number. So I said, okay, that's my number. That's fine. And went through the practice sessions with the other guys, and all the other guys were kind of the same degree of nervousness and kind of not knowing what to expect. Some guys were a little cockier than other guys. Guys are in a locker room, and so we had a good time. We said goodbye, left after that weekend, and then you didn't come back until time for training camp in July. Obviously, before then, I was doing best I could to get ready. I thought I was in the best shape of my life when I went to that first training camp, because, again, this is a golden opportunity. I don't want to blow it. So I did do everything. I mean, I had my own 2-a-day workouts on my own down at University of Virginia. And, so by the time I got up to Cleveland and to Kent State in 75, I was ready. So it was, and again, everything's a new experience. All the players are, much better than the players that you're used to playing against in college. Everybody's basically, an all-star. And it was, like I say, a really tough training camp. And especially compared, I don't want to sound really like an old guy now, but especially compared to the training camps of today, which I've certainly seen as a fan from the sidelines. We did a lot more hitting. We started out with 3 days, and then we went to 2-a-days, but we hit for at least 2 of those sessions. And nowadays they want to avoid the contact, for obvious reasons. They don't want to get players injured playing against each other, before they ever get on the playing field against another team. And I understand that, and it probably does make sense. But, back then, I think we're a little bit more expendable. And if they got hurt, just ship them out and get somebody else to take their position. So it was a great experience in terms of survival skills. And but again, we grew real close as a team just by having survived that common experience. And I think that helps. That does help build a team. I don't want to egg coaches on to say, yeah, if you have really tough practices, you have a better knit team. But I think that is true. That does happen.
It is different today. You pointed out, the lack of hitting, and that you don't do the doubles anymore. And it is obviously player safety driven, and try to add some years to their careers if you can take off some abuse in training camps and in weekly practices. But it can still be a mental grind for these young guys that are coming in. It's intimidating. What advice would you give, Dick, to rookies heading into their first training camps?
Well, I guess, and you're right, it is intimidating because, when you're there, you go there, first of all, and you're meeting all the other rookies, but this is rookie camp. You go through a whole week of practice and you start feeling good about yourself. Then all the veterans come in, you go, oh my God, look at these guys, because all these guys are huge. And it's extremely intimidating. All I can say, for a new player is you really just have to believe in yourself. You have to kind of for anything really, you kind of got to weed out the distractions, concentrate on, what you have to do, and not worry about other guys, what they look like, how they play, or anything like that. Of course, if you're lined up against somebody in practice, you got to beat them, but that's a technique thing. But it's a big psychological game. And, what Sam Bertigliano, and Sam had a lot of good sayings, but, he said the game is played 90% in between the ears, meaning if you're not using your head, you're not going to be worth much as a player. I don't care how big and strong you are. You do have to use your head to be successful in this game.
Did you, Dick, bring something new and different to each training camp, something that you wanted to focus on in particular that year to try to improve your game?
Yeah, I mean, based on, what happened in the preceding season, obviously we'd want to do better in terms of the one-loss record, and that's an overall team thing. But yeah, it is something I learned in college. You try to get a little bit better every day at whatever it is you do, and if it was pass drops one year or just, lateral movement another year, shedding blockers, every year you always had to improve on a lot of things. It wasn't really just like, oh, if I get my pass drops, get quicker into my zone during pass drops, I'll be a better player. It wasn't that simple. It was, I got to do that better. I got to get, outside running plays. I got to scrape off the outside end and come up field quicker. I got to wrap up better when I'm tackling. I got to catch the ball better. Those things all need work every year, every time. There's nothing you can relax on.
Yeah. Who were some of your favorite teammates during your years with the Browns?
Well, Clay Matthews and I became real close, in our early years, and he was drafted 3 years after me. But we came close and are still friends to this day. A lot of other guys that were there already. I remember John Garlington, who is now deceased. He was one of the early linebackers I was with on that crew. Charlie Hall was another great linebacker in those early 70s or mid 70s when I was playing. But some Dino Hall, guys that came in and out of the organization, were good friends. So Dave Logan was a great teammate, and had the biggest hands I've ever seen. No wonder he would be first guy I saw that was catching balls with one hand all the time. Now they do it a lot more. I think they made the ball actually a little smaller too. But in any event, those are some really good guys that I knew and had experience with. And
Dick, you bring up Clay Matthews. When you look at his numbers and the impact that he had, even if you just shed the stats and you just look at how he impacted a football game, how in the world is he not in Canton?
Well, I don't understand that either. I think when you talk about Canton, and I've certainly tried to advocate on behalf of Clay for the Hall of Fame, I do think he's deserving of that. But I think once you get into the segment of players that they deem to be, outside of after you get by the 10 year after you retire phase, then you're in this level with all the rest of the old players. So then you're part of a group of about 5,000 players, and they have to weed through those to see who's going to be a worthy recipient. But you're right. Clay played for an extremely long period of time, especially for a linebacker who get injured and take a lot of hits. So his longevity is one thing, but he had a high level of performance during all those years and was always a sack leader of the team, or leading or up there in terms of number of tackles. So he was a playmaker in his position as a linebacker, and he was an integral part of the team, which I think is what they look for, when you're looking at the Hall of Fame, and certainly he should be there. I don't know why. I think to me, the selection process gets a little bit too political and less dependent on just the player's credentials and his worth as a player, and you start getting all these other factors involved, and so it's part of the political process, and it doesn't do the right thing all the time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Take us through your career as you're winding down as a player. I'm always fascinated by the process that each player uses when they go through the mental gymnastics of, is it time? Do I have another year? What was that process like for you, Dick?
It's always difficult to say I'm done with this game, and I was one of those people that didn't want to acknowledge that this was all going to end someday. It was very hard for me to accept that. And as a matter of fact, as what happens with a lot of players is you play long enough and you get injured out of the game. And that's basically what happened to me. I got injured in 1983. I broke my left leg in a game, missed a significant number of games in that season. Tried to come back in 1984. I was having a lot of pain in my left ankle as a result of that break, and had to have subsequent surgery during the season or right before the season started, which I thought was going to be open and shut. I'll take 2 or 3 weeks and I'll be right back in the lineup. That didn't happen. That got infected. So I had an infection that lasted basically the entire season. So I missed the whole 84 season. And then I tried to come back in 85 after this ankle and the infection finally healed up. And I was able to run around, but I really wasn't anywhere close to the level of performance that I had in 1983 before I got hurt. So it was inevitable that, Marty Schottenheimer was the coach at that point in time, and he had to call me in his office, said, if you were back at your 83 level, it's a no-brainer. You're on the team, but I can't keep you on the team the way you are right now. I go, I understand, Marty, and this has got to happen. So when that happened, it was, again, it was tough psychologically for me, to give up this thing that I had loved throughout my life and had gotten to the level where it was my dream, and I'm living my dream, but now the dream is over. So it's always difficult, I think, for guys to go through that.
So for a guy like yourself, well-educated, very bright, I don't know if it was always your ambition to one day become a lawyer, but how did that transformation take place?
It was not always my ambition to become a lawyer. It was something that I had to actually uncover, and I did have help. I talked to the gentleman who was my agent at the time. He did suggest that I do take some post-career type counseling for, job selection, that type of counseling. And I did that through Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. And they're the ones that actually suggested that a career in law might be something that you might like. You have the aptitude for it. And so I did start down that route, and it is, it's a long route. You do have to take an entrance exam, which I did, and I did get accepted into law school. Now that was actually happening all in 85 and I was still playing at the time, because that was my backup. Because of what happened in 84, I go, this is not going to last forever. That's when I first started realizing, I'm 32 years old and I have a bum ankle. I don't think I'm going to be playing football for too much longer, which turned out to be correct. But I had already prepared and had been accepted into Cleveland Marshall College of Law here in town. So I had an acceptance date for law school, but I was also in training camp with the Browns in 85. So I had a backup, which I did have to use. And it turned out, that, I was in class, soon after I had been terminated by the Browns.
Was there ever a time, Dick, where you're sitting in the classroom, just probably days or weeks after you were wearing a helmet, going through practice, where you wondered at warp speed, how did I go from that to this?
Only when looking back. Yeah, only with the luxury of being able to look back from time. But I once I did get into law school and was, that's obviously a demanding schedule. You didn't have a whole lot of time to think back and go, what if, this, what if that, it was too much in the present that I had to concentrate on, which was actually a very good thing, I believe, because a lot of other athletes that have had to leave their careers and don't have something to go right into, I think are going to struggle more mentally than something that you have to get into right away, and you have to devote 100% of your time and attention to, which certainly was law school. So that was a big help for me, and I think it would have been different had I not had that.
When you first were told by the career counseling folks that you might have the aptitude to be a lawyer, what was your original thought to that?
It was, where did that come from? Because really, I had no background or training in law. Nobody in my family was a lawyer. I didn't have friends who were lawyers other than, the person that was representing me as, for my contract with the Browns. And so there was really nothing to push me in that direction. But it was obviously something that somebody believed in me that thought I could do it. So I was able to develop that belief in myself. And you do need that to go forward with anything in life. So I took all those necessary steps and was in that position when the time came that I had to pull the plug on my athletic career.
And what a second act you've put together, from a career as a very successful football player to going to law school, becoming a lawyer, and now, and you have for some time, have been serving as a judge here in Cleveland. What has that been like for you to be able to have that second act in the same town, but not your hometown as your first?
Right. Well, I do believe that it was very important for me to want to stay in Cleveland because I believe this was where, I had established my identity. And I believe that, my career and playing with the Browns was kind of a tie to this community that I didn't want to give up and just go somewhere else, even back, to my hometown, because there was really nothing there for me. So I knew this was my best opportunity. And when I got established in the law and working for several law firms here in town, that was still my identity. And that's the thing that I think is interesting, that, once you play for the Browns in this town, no matter what else you do, you'll always be remembered as a Browns player. And that's certainly been the case with respect to me. But that's been a positive thing all along. And I do love the people in Cleveland. I love the Browns fans, and they are very knowledgeable fans. They're not fly-by-nighters. Most Browns fans know the whole history. And, the history in the past 20 years has not been too great. But at least we've had some highlights, seasons, going back to with Bernie Kosar, et cetera. But the transition, again, because the law is a career that you can't really do part-time, and you have to dive into it. So there were a lot of parallels to football and training for football, getting ready for football, because being a good lawyer is all about preparation. And you have to prepare your case. You have to know your case inside and out. You have to know it better than inside, and you do have an opponent usually in most litigation settings, at least. So that was very natural for me to dovetail into as far as another career. But once I was into it, that was my career. The career with the Browns was something I did in the past, but now this is what I do in the future. And then evolving from a lawyer, a practicing lawyer, to a judge on the bench, that's been a whole nother transition because that's a whole different kind of law that I do practice now than I did as a civil attorney for the most part.
Sure.
I did criminal law. Now I do criminal and civil as my job as a judge.
Dick, before we let you go, you obviously know the love and the affection that Browns fans have for you. You would feel that every time you would take the field at the old stadium. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell Cleveland Browns fans what they've meant to you through the years, both as a player and as your second career as a lawyer and now a judge.
Well, I do think for you Browns fans out there that thank you for all your loyalty and outstanding loyalty, I think, over the years, and especially for a team that's tried, for a team that's had struggles, team that failed but had some successes. And I think Browns fans certainly hang on to any little successes that we get. And now that I'm a retired player, I'm in that same boat. I'm a Browns fan, so I live and die with what happens on a Sunday. And it's, like I said before, I think it's unique in Cleveland that the fans are very educated. They go back. We've got a history of the Browns' great teams in the 60s and going back to the '64 championship team. So I think there's still people around that remember that, and even if they are not still around, they have instilled that in their kids and their grandkids. And I've talked to many Browns fans that said, my dad took me to my first Browns game when I was 5 years old, and I still remember that day. And I go, that's the kind of bonding that I think has helped make this team such an integral part of the community. And it really, that's when the Browns left Cleveland in, I think it was 93, 91, I think. But anyway, that was like, for me, that's like taking the heart right out of the town. And that was so traumatic for me. And I was so glad when, we finally got a team back again. And now I think some people might not even remember that, but it's part of our history too. And I do think that if not for Browns fans, that would have never happened. We could still be without a team. But
absolutely,
really brought him back.
Well, Dick, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us and for us to hear some of your stories and to catch up with you. You look great. You're doing great. And I really appreciate the time that you've made for Browns fans. Thank you so much for joining.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Jay.
Absolutely. And thank you to Browns fans for watching another edition of Club 46 driven by Bridgestone. We hope to see you again very soon with another current or former all-time great Cleveland Brown. Until then, I'm Jay Crawford, and we'll see you soon.